king of what? If my kingdom were from this world, Jesus says, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here. Thanks be to God. Today we celebrate the feast of Christ the King. It's the last Sunday of the church year, a sure sign that Advent is just around the corner. Also known as Reign of Christ Sunday, it is the day when we specifically celebrate Christ's dominion, Christ's kingship, Christ's rule over all creation. And again I say, king of what? Now there are problems with kingdom and dominion language being used today. We do not have the same societal connections with those words as when they were first assigned to Christ. Human language is limited, and so it was the best available terminology to use at the time, but it's not good. For one thing, it's very gendered and very patriarchal. It calls to mind images that perhaps at the time were not front of mind when the words were used. But today we cannot disentangle king and kingdom from empire, colonialism, conquest, and oppression. And yet we have Christ the King Sunday. King of what? The thing is, this doesn't feel like a world where Christ has had very much dominion at all. And I would say particularly the last few days in the news. There's a couple things that have happened lately. Kyle Rittenhouse has been acquitted. This is the one who drove across state lines armed to enter the fray of riots happening in Kenosha, Wisconsin. This is the one who used a semi-automatic weapon to kill two and wound another. This one has been found not guilty on those charges against him for shooting three others during a riot over the shooting death of Jacob Blake. He pleaded self-defense. Meanwhile, also this week, Julius Jones has had his life spared. This one has been granted the ability to live out the rest of his life in prison with no chance of parole, a reduction in sentence from the death penalty he was given 19 years ago. This clemency came mere moments before his scheduled death and comes in opposition to the state parole board, which has twice recommended parole, given strong new evidence of his innocence, evidence which points to a vastly flawed and deeply racist system's role in this man's story. And in the midst of all of this, the defense has rested their case in the trial of the three men accused of murdering Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia while he was on a run. Not on the run, he was just on a jog, living his life. And those of us who have been following the Rittenhouse and the Jones legal battles will continue to watch with varying degrees of hope as this trial continues to unfold. And you may wonder why I bring all of this up, but Christ's kingdom is not of this world, as he tells us. And I say thanks be to God, because the kingdoms of this world are the kingdoms of division, racism, and violence. Our society bows down to guns, to whiteness, to money and power, and keeping those who have power in those positions of having it. And I know what we worship this morning, but I wonder sometimes what our wider society worships this morning. I usually think of feasts and festivals in the church year as times to put a little more pep in the step and worship with a bit more excitement and joy. But if you can't already tell, I'm not feeling that today. Today I'm grieving. I grieve for Kenosha, Wisconsin. I grieve for Julius Jones, whose life has been spared, and that is wonderful, but who has been told time and time again that the holiness of life that God gave him is up for debate by the white folks in power around him. I'm grieving for Ahmaud Arbery, I'm grieving for Asian American children, and if that comes out of the blue, it's because in the midst of being kept up to date and watching the news on all of these other stories, I found out that the president of a powerful political conference publicly stated this week that PBS should be defunded because they have a new Asian American Sesame Street character, a 7-year-old electric guitar player who, like Julia, who is autistic, and other characters before her, is going to allow young children to see people like them on the TV shows they watch, which is amazing, but I grieve for the children who are still being told that they don't deserve to see themselves on TV. So again, I say Christ is King of all creation. What? Well, Jesus tells Pilate, and in so doing tells us exactly what he is king of. If my kingdom were from this world, Jesus says, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here. Now, Jesus had followers. It's not that he didn't have followers to fight for him. He had followers, but they didn't fight. In fact, as he was having this little chat with Pilate, they were off hiding in fear. Jesus is not the king of violence, is not the king of uniformity, is not the king of me alone or any individual's wants. There's a scene from the old movie, The Princess Bride, where the young princess is having a nightmare about the day she will be crowned queen. So she had turned away from her true love in order to save him and was scheduled to be married to the evil Prince Humperdinck so that he could be king. And in her dream, all the people are bowing down to her, except one woman who is listed in the credits as the ancient booer, who does not bow. Instead, she boos. She calls the princess all kinds of names for throwing away love, saying she is the queen of refuse. So bow to her if you want. Bow to her. Bow to the queen of slime, the queen of filth. I often picture that scene when I picture Pilate trying to figure out this king in front of him. King not of the Jews, which would have been powerless enough given Rome's occupation and oppression at the time. No, Jesus is king of those who are afraid and hiding. King of the cowards, king of the doubters like Thomas would be, king of the deniers like Peter, king of the weak, king of the oppressed, king of the useless. So many want to make Christ to be the king of their own kingdoms or king of the kingdom that they want to see in power. They declare Christ to be king of victorious, king of the wealthy, king of the United States of America, king of those who help themselves. But to all of that, Jesus says no. As it is, my kingdom is not from here. It's not from here. It does not meet our expectations at all. As it is, Christ's kingdom is the kingdom of the cross, state-sponsored torture and death designed to keep oppressed minorities in their place and those in power afraid of losing what they have. And so this feast day of Christ the King does make room for grief, even while it proclaims good news. We are not the ones who get to decide what it means for Christ to be king. After all, Christ's kingdom is not from here and not from us. And we do not get to decide what it means for Christ to have that power. It's Christ's kingdom, Christ's church, and Christ's table, which welcomes and feeds all. Christ is the king of a kingdom not at all of this world. Thanks be to God. Amen.